Hey there, footy fans. Time for a bit more footy fun with FootyFin, and now preview of these epic Rugby World Cup semi-finals taking place this weekend. The first match being Friday night French time, which equates to 5 a.m. Brisbane time for those in the Sunshine State of Australia. And match one is New Zealand versus Argentina. And yes, this is meant to represent Argentina. Los Pumas, they are now my team of the four left. This is a team I would most like to see win not only the semi-final, but indeed the Rugby World Cup final. And why is that, I hear you ask? Well, very good question, and one I anticipated. First of all, Argentina have never won a Rugby World Cup final. In fact, they've never made it to the finals. They've made it to the semis 2 or 3 times. They finished as high as third in 2007 in France, but they've never won it. Indeed, no nation from South America or indeed North America, no nation from the Americas has ever made the final of the Rugby World Cup, let alone won it. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is their head coach, Aussie Michael Cheika, of course, has coached around the world previously, won a Heineken Cup with Leinster in 2009. The Irish team went to Stade Francais, came to the Wallabies, won a Super 14, Super Rugby in 2014, I think, with the Waratahs over the Crusaders. Came to the Wallabies and within a year got them to a Rugby World Cup final in 2015. Was with them at the last Rugby World Cup where they bowed out in the quarterfinals, and is now with Argentina. And reason three is that they do represent the Southern Hemisphere and indeed the Rugby Championship. So that's why I'm backing Los Pumas. Vamos Los Pumas! So listen, Michael Cheika is a wily customer. He has been around the block a few times. He even coached the Lebanon Rugby League team in the Rugby League World Cup a year ago, as I've said before on this channel. So look, if I was Cheika, look, Argentina are clearly underdogs and massive. New Zealand are the red hot favourites here by a country mile. And I'd be sort of focusing on that backs to the wall underdog status. It's not the dog in the fight, it's the fight in the dog, right? Yes, indeed. Also, as far as I can see, New Zealand do have a few weaknesses. They are a very strong team, but they do have weaknesses. They do have Achilles' heels, not the least of which is their poor discipline record in recent years, and particularly at this tournament and in the warm-up games. Okay, so they've got bad habits. They gave away 2 yellow cards in the last match, and the likes of Scott Barrett in particular. I think he's the first All Black ever to get red carded twice. So, you know, get under his skin and who knows what might happen. In terms of the cattle in New Zealand, look, Rico Ioane is clearly a weak link in the back line. He's got very poor defence. He doesn't like to get involved in rucks and probably doesn't have the skills required at this level. And he's shown he can try to be a bit lippy and play a bit of mind games as well. But anyway, I see him, the latter point aside, I do see him as the weakest link in the New Zealand backline. Then off the bench, you know, there is some inexperience at play here. Players like Talia and Jordan are relatively new, at least in the World Cup context. Finlay Christie off the bench, also scrum half, very inexperienced. And they do tend to rely on a couple of key players a lot, such as Ardie Savea and to some degree Richie Mo'unga. He saved them in the last match. So if you can somehow nullify those players, or if they were to get an injury, then New Zealand are in big trouble. And of course, lastly, New Zealand, as much as they'd love to deny it, and Ian Foster tried to do so in his recent press conference, methinks he does protest too much. They are haunted to some degree by the ghosts of 2019. where they basically choked in the semi-final against England. And so we've got 10 or 12 of them backing up here 4 years later. If somehow they do get upset, they do get off their rhythm and get behind, those things will be coming into play. And of course, Ian Foster was part of the coaching panel on that occasion as well. So if Argentina can leverage that weakness at all, then it would probably serve them well. In terms of strengths for Argentina, they've got the pinpoint laser accurate boot of Buffelli. They do have the underdog status, as I said. It's not the dog in the fight, it's the fight in the dog. And Michael Cheika will have them fighting, that's for sure. Not literally, but you know, fighting spirit. They do have the passion, the flair, they've got explosive pace, and they can have a pretty strong forward games, really strong hooker in Montoya and backup hooker as well. So, look, anything can happen. Obviously, New Zealand are the red hot favourites, but vamos los Pumas! Okay, and then moving on, 24 hours later, we see the second semi-final, South Africa versus England. So interestingly here, England is not only the only Northern Hemisphere team left in the Final Four, despite predictions to the contrary, they're actually the only unbeaten team left, if you can believe it. Both New Zealand and South Africa, as well as Argentina, dropped matches in the pool stages. Of course, Argentina were beaten by England. Interestingly, this one is a rematch of the 2019 Rugby World Cup final that South Africa won relatively easily in the end in the final 20 minutes. For the train spotters out there, this is actually a novel occurrence as far as I can see across the 9 preceding Rugby World Cups. Never has a semi-final been basically a rematch of the 2 teams from the preceding Rugby World Cup final. And one for the real train spotters out there, I think twice 2 teams have matched up in the quarterfinal that represents a rematch of the preceding final, and that happened to be Australia and England on both occasions, if I'm not mistaken, in the 1995 World Cup quarterfinal and in the 2007 World Cup quarterfinal that occurred. We both know how those 2 results finished, and we won't go into that. Anyway, in terms of the England squad, they have made a few changes. In terms of their back 3, they've picked a back 3 that particularly seems to indicate they're going for a kick and chase type game. That's what they want to play, and running, you know, chasing kicks, handing the ball back to South Africa basically, and a bit of a focus on the set piece. Of course, they're assuming that South Africa are very strong in that, as they are. So for example, they've come back to relatively older props who are usually accustomed to the bench in Joe Marler and Coles. On the other hand, South Africa have named a totally unchanged 23. So for example, they've got some key players on the bench, including their previous winning halves combo in de Klerk and Pollard, fullback Leroux, the likes Quagga Smith, etc. So that's interesting. Again, if I was Erasmus and Ninamba, I'd be focusing on a few weaknesses in the England team. They've picked Johnny May again on the bench, and even some passionate England fans and pundits have pointed out that he's really quite old and well past his prime, so I'd be looking to exploit that. As I say, props such as Marler and Coles are not young men, and they're fairly slow. Could be easy to get it for one of those whippy South African backs to get around, just as Cheslin Colby did in the 2019 Rugby World Cup final. Also, they've got a very staid, boring, old school, predictable game, really, that sort of focuses on kicks, kicking back to the opposition, some set piece play, and really not much in the way of making use of the back line a lot of the time, and some pretty slow ball movement out the back line if and when it does happen. So I'm sure South Africa will be looking to exploit that. Anyhow, we're bang on 10 minutes. So it's fascinating. Of course, South Africa are the favourites. Everyone's tipping it's going to be a South Africa-New Zealand final, but it's a funny old game. You never do know just what might happen. And the likes of the All Blacks, just ask them how a few semi-finals have turned out against the likes of France or the Wallabies back in 03, 07, or against England in 2019. So who knows? Can't wait for it. Bring it on. May the best teams win. And until next time, catch you. Where will you find me? I'll be in a ruck somewhere. Okay, keep it clean. See ya.